The rescue shuttle descended through the dusty atmosphere, its thrusters fighting against the swirling orange winds. Captain Elena Reyes gripped the harness across her chest, feeling the violent turbulence through her tactical suit. As the Galactic Alliance's leading xenobiologist on this mission, she had been briefed about what to expect, but nothing in her 15 years of interplanetary emergency response had prepared her for this level of devastation. Final approach to landing zone," announced the pilot, his voice tight with concentration. Atmospheric readings show high levels of radiation and toxic particulates. Level 4 biosuits mandatory for all personnel upon exit. Through the viewports, Elena could see the ruined landscape, once a thriving colony on this remote planet at the border between two galactic zones of influence. Now it was nothing but smoldering craters and twisted metal. The colony had been caught in the crossfire of a territorial dispute, becoming collateral damage in a conflict they had no part in. "What's the projected survivor count?" Elena asked, already knowing the answer would be grim. Commander Voss, the mission leader, didn't look up from his datapad. "Official reports indicate 0. This is strictly a research and documentation mission. Captain Reyes, we collect samples, record the aftermath, and report back to Alliance headquarters." Elena felt her stomach tighten. She had signed up for rescue missions, not body counts and specimen collection. But as the shuttle touched down with a metallic groan, she knew arguing would be pointless. The year 2417 had already seen 3 border skirmishes like this one, and the Galactic Alliance's resources were stretched thin. The airlock hissed open, and the team of 6 specialists moved out in formation. Elena activated her biosuit's atmospheric filters and stepped onto the alien soil. The scanner in her hand pulsed with readings, mapping biological signatures in a 10-kilometer radius. "Team Alpha, you have 4 hours before radiation levels become critical for the shuttle's shielding." Commander Voss's voice crackled through the comm system. "Stay within your assigned quadrants and maintain constant communication." Elena had been assigned the Eastern Quadrant, where the colony's medical facility had once stood. As she navigated through the wreckage, her scanner occasionally picked up organic matter, nothing alive, just the lingering biological echoes of what had once been the colonists. The medical facility was now a skeleton of its former self, its walls partially collapsed, medical equipment scattered like broken toys. Elena methodically collected samples, recording her observations for the official report. Eastern Quadrant shows evidence of triage attempts prior to final attack. Multiple biological samples indicate at least 3 distinct species were present during the conflict. She moved deeper into the facility, stepping carefully over fallen support beams. Her scanner suddenly emitted a soft beep, different from its regular pattern. Elena froze, adjusting the sensitivity. There it was again, a faint biological signature, barely registering on the scale. "Command, I'm picking up a potential life sign in the Eastern Medical Facility," she reported, already moving toward the signal. Commander Voss's response was immediate and firm. "Captain Reyes, protocol dictates that you wait for backup before investigating anomalous readings. The signature is extremely weak. Commander, waiting could mean losing it entirely." Elena continued forward, knowing she was bending the rules, but unable to ignore what might be the only survivor on this desolate planet. The scanner led her to what appeared to have been a secure isolation room, its reinforced door hanging partially off its hinges. Inside, medical equipment lay scattered across the floor, and in the center, a small stasis pod had been cracked open, its power supply flickering weakly. Inside the pod lay a child, at least. Elena assumed it was a child based on its size. The being was unlike any species she had encountered before. Its skin had a translucent quality that seemed to pulse with a dim inner light, shifting between pale blue and violet. Where a human child would have hair, this being had fine, crystalline filaments that caught the light from Elena's helmet. Its eyes were closed, and its chest barely moved with shallow breaths. Elena's medical training kicked in immediately. She knelt beside the pod, running her scanner over the small body. The readings were unlike anything in her database. Command, I found a survivor. Juvenile, unknown species, critical condition. She was already pulling emergency medical supplies from her pack. Captain Reyes, hold position. Do not intervene until the xenobiology team assesses potential biohazards. Commander Voss's voice had taken on a warning tone. Elena hesitated for just a moment. The Alliance protocols were clear. Unknown alien physiology could harbor dangerous pathogens. Direct contact without proper analysis was strictly forbidden. But as she looked at the child, she saw its eyes flutter open. They were massive, taking up nearly half its face, with no pupils, but instead swirling patterns of gold against deep violet. Those eyes fixed on Elena with unmistakable intelligence and fear. Protocol be damned. Elena opened her medical kit and began administering emergency life support measures, adapting human medical techniques as best she could for the alien physiology. The subject is conscious and responsive, she reported, deliberately using clinical language to mask her emotional response. I am stabilizing vital functions using standard xenobiology protocols. It wasn't entirely a lie. She had written some of those protocols herself. As she worked, she spoke softly to the child, not knowing if it could understand her, but hoping her tone would convey reassurance. You're going to be okay. I'm here to help you. The child's crystalline filaments trembled, and Elena detected a faint, harmonic resonance emanating from them. Some form of communication, perhaps? She recorded the frequencies for later analysis. Captain Reyes, a security team is en route to your position. Maintain minimal contact with the subject until they arrive. Commander Voss's voice had grown colder. Elena knew what that meant. The security team would quarantine the child, subjecting it to invasive tests and procedures. In its weakened state, such treatment could be fatal. She made a decision. Command, the subject's life signs are fading. I'm initiating emergency transport to the medical bay on our shuttle. Elena carefully lifted the child from the broken stasis pod, cradling it against her biosuit. The being was surprisingly light, as if its bones were hollow, or perhaps made of something other than calcium. The child's eyes widened in fear at being moved, and the harmonic resonance from its filaments increased in pitch. Elena held it closer, whispering, You're safe now. I won't let anything happen to you. As if understanding her words, the child relaxed slightly in her arms, its filaments dulling to a softer hum. Elena made her way back through the ruins, moving as quickly as she dared while trying not to jostle her fragile charge. Her mind raced with questions. What species was this child? How had it survived when all others had perished? And perhaps, most troublingly, why had it been in isolation? The shuttle came into view, just as Commander Voss and Lieutenant Jackson Vale intercepted her path. Vale was the mission's military liaison, a tall, imposing figure whose hand rested casually on his sidearm. Captain Reyes, Commander Voss said, his voice tight with controlled anger. You have directly violated quarantine protocols. Hand over the specimen immediately. Elena bristled at the word specimen, but kept her voice steady. Commander, this is a child in critical condition. It needs immediate medical attention, which I am qualified to provide. Lieutenant Vale stepped forward. Captain, we have strict orders regarding biological material from conflict zones. The risk of weaponized pathogens is too great. This isn't biological material. Lieutenant, this is a sentient being. Elena held the child closer, feeling its heartbeat, or whatever equivalent it possessed, fluttering against her chest. Commander Voss's expression hardened. Captain Reyes, this is a direct order. Surrender the alien to the security team for proper containment and analysis. Elena stood her ground. With all due respect, Commander, Alliance Charter Section 117 grants medical officers autonomy in life-threatening situations. I am invoking that right now. A tense silence fell over the group. Elena could see the calculations running behind Commander Voss's eyes. Pushing the issue would require him to explain the confrontation in his report, potentially bringing unwanted scrutiny to his command decisions. Finally, he nodded curtly. The alien will be transported to the medical bay under quarantine protocols. You will be responsible for ensuring it poses no threat to this crew, Captain Reyes. If there is even a hint of biological contamination, I will personally see to its immediate termination and your court-martial. Understood, Commander. Elena kept her voice neutral, hiding her relief. As they boarded the shuttle, Elena felt the child tremble against her. She looked down to see its eyes fixed on her face, studying her with an intensity that seemed beyond its apparent age. "It's okay," she whispered, too quietly for anyone else to hear. "I'll take care of you." She didn't know if the child understood her words, but as the shuttle's engines roared to life, lifting them away from the devastated planet, she felt the harmonic resonance from its filaments shift to a gentler, almost melodic pattern. For the first time since finding the child, Elena allowed herself to wonder what she had gotten herself into, and what consequences might follow. The medical bay of the Alliance rescue shuttle was designed for triage and emergency care, not for long-term treatment of unknown alien species. Elena worked quickly to create a makeshift isolation chamber using surgical fields and modified life support equipment. Lieutenant Vale stood at the entrance, watching her work with thinly veiled suspicion. "The commander wants hourly reports on the specimen's condition and any potential hazards." Elena nodded without looking up from her work. "I'll provide updates as needed, Lieutenant. And it's a patient, not a specimen." Vale's expression remained impassive. "Just remember your priorities, Captain. The safety of this crew comes before your humanitarian impulses." After he left, Elena carefully placed the alien child on the medical bed she had prepared, free from the confines of her biosuit within the isolation field. She could now examine the child more thoroughly. Its anatomy defied conventional xenobiology. The translucent skin revealed a complex circulatory system that seemed to carry a luminescent fluid rather than blood. The crystalline filaments that Elena had initially thought were hair-like appeared to be sensory organs, vibrating in response to sounds and movements around them. "I need to give you a name," Elena murmured as she worked. "At least until I can figure out what your people call themselves." She thought for a moment. "How about Lyra? It means song in an old Earth language, and those sounds you make remind me of music." The child, Lyra, watched Elena's every move with those large, swirling golden-violet eyes. There was intelligence there, and something else, a depth that seemed at odds with its apparently young age. Elena's scanner revealed that Lyra was suffering from radiation poisoning and some form of cellular degradation that she couldn't immediately identify. Without knowing the child's normal physiology, treatment would be challenging at best. "I wish you could tell me what happened to you," Elena said softly, administering what she hoped was an appropriate dose of broad-spectrum radiation countermeasures. "Who are your people? Why were you the only one left?" As if in response, Lyra's filaments vibrated, creating a complex pattern of harmonics that made Elena's medical instruments flutter with interference. The door to the medical bay slid open, and Dr. Kai Mori entered. The ship's scientific officer was younger than Elena, with a reputation for brilliant research and a strict adherence to protocol. Elena tensed, preparing for another confrontation. To her surprise, Dr. Mori approached the isolation field with genuine curiosity rather than suspicion. "Remarkable," he said, studying Lyra's readings on the monitor. I've never seen anything like this physiological structure in the database. I've administered basic radiation treatment, but without knowing the baseline for this species. I'm working blind, Elena explained, grateful for a colleague who seemed interested in healing rather than containment. Dr. Mori nodded thoughtfully. The cellular structure appears to have regenerative properties, unlike anything I've encountered. Look at this. He pointed to a microscopic image on the screen, showing cells that seem to be rebuilding themselves in real time. These cells aren't just healing, they're evolving to resist the radiation damage. Elena leaned closer, fascination temporarily overriding her concern. That's impossible. Adaptive evolution doesn't happen in real time at the cellular level. Apparently, for this species, it does. Dr. Mori's eyes gleamed with scientific excitement. Captain Reyes, do you realize what this could mean? We're looking at biological capabilities that could revolutionize medicine across the Alliance. Elena glanced at Lyra, who was watching them with those unnervingly intelligent eyes. Let's focus on saving this child first. Doctor, scientific breakthroughs can wait. Dr. Mori had the grace to look slightly embarrassed. Of course. I didn't mean to sound callous. He hesitated, then added in a lower voice. You should know that Commander Voss has already reported this finding to Alliance headquarters. They're sending a specialized containment team to meet us at Outpost 47. Elena felt a chill run down her spine. Containment team. Lyra is a patient, not a laboratory specimen. Lyra, you've named it? Dr. Mori raised an eyebrow. I've named her, Elena corrected firmly. And yes, until we know what her people call themselves. She needs a name. Dr. Mori glanced at the door, then lowered his voice further. Elena, I understand your concern for the child, but you need to be careful. The Alliance has protocols for unknown species, especially ones with unusual biological capabilities. They'll want to study her, and they won't be gentle about it. Then they'll have to go through me first, Elena said, her voice hardening. Dr. Mori looked at her for a long moment. I'll help where I can, but don't make me choose between my career and your crusade. After he left, Elena turned back to Lyra, who had been watching the exchange with unnerving focus. Don't worry, she whispered. I won't let them take you. The next 12 hours were a blur of medical procedures and clandestine research. Elena used every resource at her disposal to understand Lyra's physiology, while keeping the most remarkable findings from her official reports. Dr. Mori, true to his word, provided assistance without asking too many questions, though Elena could see the conflict in his eyes. Lyra was growing stronger by the hour, her body adapting to the treatments with astonishing speed. The harmonic resonance from her filaments had become more complex, almost conversational in its patterns. Elena found herself responding to these sounds as if they were speech, and sometimes, though she told herself it was just her imagination, it seemed as if Lyra understood her as well. During a rare quiet moment, as the shuttle cruised through hyperspace toward Outpost 47, Elena sat beside Lyra's bed, recording observations in her personal log rather than the official medical record. Your cellular regeneration rate is unlike anything in our database, she murmured, more to herself than to Lyra. Your people must have evolved in an environment with high radiation or extreme environmental stressors to develop such adaptability. Lyra's filaments vibrated gently, creating a pattern that Elena had come to recognize as a question. I wish I knew what happened to your colony, Elena continued. Were your people new to that planet? Refugees, perhaps? The border regions were often populated by displaced species, seeking safety from the larger galactic conflicts. Lyra's eyes suddenly widened, and her filaments stood rigid. The harmonic resonance shifted to a discordant, almost painful frequency. What's wrong? Elena moved closer, checking the medical readouts. Are you in pain? Lyra reached out with a slender, four-fingered hand and touched Elena's forehead. The contact sent a jolt through Elena's mind. Not painful, but intensely disorienting. For a brief moment, she saw not the medical bay, but a vast, crystalline city beneath a purple sky. Thousands of beings like Lyra moved through structures that seemed to grow organically from the ground, their filaments creating a symphony of harmonic resonance that was both communication and art. Then the vision shifted, showing the same city under attack. Ships unlike any Elena had seen before descended from the sky, unleashing weapons that shattered the crystalline structures and sent their inhabitants fleeing in terror. The harmony became cacophony, the resonance a scream of collective agony. When the vision faded, Elena found herself on her knees beside Lyra's bed, gasping for breath. The child was watching her intently, filaments still vibrating with that discordant frequency. "That was your homeworld," Elena whispered, understanding dawning. "Not the colony where I found you. You're refugees. Your entire species." She couldn't finish the thought, the horror of what she'd witnessed overwhelming her. Lyra's filaments gradually settled into a more subdued pattern, and she reached for Elena's hand again. This time, Elena steeled herself for another vision, but instead, she felt only a gentle pressure and a faint, harmonious hum that somehow conveyed gratitude. "You can share memories," Elena said in wonder. "That's how your people communicate, not just through sound but through direct mental connection." The implications were staggering. Such an ability would be seen as both a miraculous scientific discovery and a potential security threat by Alliance authorities. The door to the medical bay slid open, and Lieutenant Vale entered with two security officers. His expression was grim. "Captain Reyes, the commander has ordered a full biological scan of the alien subject. Alliance protocols have been updated while you've been attending to your patient." The way he said patient made it clear he shared Commander Voss's view of Lyra as a specimen rather than a person. Elena rose to her feet, positioning herself between the security team and Lyra. "Lieutenant, the patient is still in recovery. Any additional stress could compromise her condition. These orders come directly from Alliance headquarters." "Captain," Vale replied, his hand moving to rest on his sidearm in a not-so-subtle warning. "The automated scanning system will be brought online, and a full genetic and neural mapping will be conducted. Your presence is not required." Elena felt her heart racing, but kept her voice steady. "As the chief medical officer on this mission, I have final authority over all procedures performed on patients under my care. Alliance Charter Section 117 has been temporarily suspended for cases involving unknown species from conflict zones." Vale finished for her. "The recent border attacks have raised concerns about biological warfare. All specimens must be thoroughly analyzed for potential threats." Elena glanced back at Lyra, who was watching the confrontation with those impossibly knowing eyes. The child's filaments were vibrating rapidly, creating a pattern Elena hadn't observed before, something between fear and determination. "At least allow me to remain present during the procedure to monitor her vital signs," Elena insisted, searching for any compromise that would let her stay with Lyra. Lieutenant Vale considered this for a moment, then nodded curtly. "You may observe from the monitoring station, but you will not interfere with the scanning process. Is that clear, Captain?" "Crystal clear, Lieutenant," Elena replied, forcing her voice to remain professional despite the anger and fear coursing through her. The automated scanning system was wheeled into the medical bay, a complex array of sensors and sampling devices designed to analyze unknown biological entities without risk to the crew. Elena had used similar equipment in her research, but never on a conscious, intelligent being. As the security officers prepared to activate the system, Elena moved to the monitoring station as ordered, but positioned herself where Lyra could see her. She tried to convey reassurance with her expression, hoping the child could understand. The scanning began, bathing Lyra in a blue light as sensors mapped every aspect of her biology. The child remained still, her eyes fixed on Elena, but her filaments vibrated with increasing intensity, creating a harmonic pattern that made the scanning equipment flicker with interference. "The subject is disrupting the scan," one of the security officers reported, adjusting the controls. "Increasing power to compensate." The blue light intensified, and Elena saw Lyra flinch in pain. The medical readouts showed a spike in what Elena had identified as stress indicators. "The power level is too high," Elena protested. "You're hurting her." Lieutenant Vale ignored her, watching the scanning progress on his datapad. "Interesting. The genetic structure is unlike anything in our database. Some sequences appear to be—" He stopped, frowning at the screen. "That can't be right." "What is it?" Elena asked, moving closer despite the lieutenant's earlier warning. Vale's expression darkened. "The genetic structure shows signs of engineered adaptability. This isn't a natural evolutionary trait. It's artificial." He looked up at Lyra with renewed suspicion. "This species was designed as a biological weapon." "That's ridiculous," Elena protested. "You can't make that determination from a preliminary scan of an unknown species." "The evidence is clear, Captain," Vale insisted, turning the datapad so she could see the results. "These genetic markers match known patterns of bioweapon engineering. The ability to adapt to radiation, the accelerated healing, the unusual neural structure. It all points to deliberate design for warfare." Elena studied the data, her scientific training battling with her instinctive defense of Lyra. The genetic structure was indeed unusual, with sequences that seemed to reconfigure themselves in real time. But there could be countless natural explanations for such adaptability. "Correlation is not causation, Lieutenant," she argued. "Many species evolve extreme adaptability in response to harsh environments. Without understanding the evolutionary history of her people, these conclusions are premature at best. Alliance security protocols don't have the luxury of waiting for academic certainty." "Captain," Vale replied coldly, "the containment team will make the final determination when we reach Outpost 47. As they argued, neither noticed that the harmonic resonance from Lyra's filaments had changed in tone and intensity. The scanning equipment suddenly emitted a high-pitched whine, and the display screens flickered with static. "What's happening?" Vale demanded, turning back to the scanning array. Before anyone could respond, the equipment shut down completely, plunging the medical bay into momentary darkness before the emergency lights activated. In the dimmed lighting, Elena saw Lyra sitting upright on the medical bed, her translucent skin glowing with internal light that pulsed in rhythm with her filaments' vibrations. The child's eyes were fixed on Lieutenant Vale, and for the first time, Elena felt a chill of uncertainty about what exactly she had rescued. The ship's communication system crackled to life. "Medical Bay, report status," Commander Voss's voice demanded. "We're reading a power surge in your section." Lieutenant Vale reached for his communicator, but before he could respond, Lyra raised a hand toward him. The lieutenant froze in place, his eyes widening in shock or fear. Elena couldn't tell which. Then, to Elena's astonishment, Vale slowly lowered his hand and spoke in a voice utterly devoid of its previous hostility. "Everything is under control, Commander. The scanning equipment experienced a minor malfunction. No threat detected." "Acknowledged," Commander Voss replied, after a brief hesitation. "Complete the scan as soon as the equipment is repaired." As the communication ended, Lieutenant Vale remained standing rigidly in place, his expression blank. The security officers looked at him in confusion, waiting for orders. "Lieutenant," one of them ventured. Vale blinked rapidly, as if waking from a trance. He looked at Lyra with a mixture of fear and wonder. "What did you do to me?" he whispered. Lyra's filaments vibrated gently, and Elena felt rather than heard a response, a sensation of reassurance and apology combined. She communicated with you, didn't she? Elena asked, moving closer to Lyra protectively. Showed you something? Vale nodded slowly, his hand trembling slightly as he reached up to touch his temple. I saw... I don't know how to describe it. A civilization. Advanced, peaceful, then destruction. So much death. He looked at Lyra with new eyes. They weren't weapons. They were hunted because of what they could do, because they could share thoughts, memories, emotions directly mind to mind. The security officers exchanged uneasy glances, their hands moving toward their weapons. Stand down, Vale ordered sharply, surprising everyone in the room, including himself. He hesitated, then continued with more confidence. The scan results were inconclusive. We'll wait for the containment team at Outpost 47 before proceeding further. After Vale and his officers left, Elena turned to Lyra in amazement. What did you show him? In response, Lyra reached for Elena's hand. This time, Elena didn't hesitate to take it. The vision that flowed into her mind was clearer than before. A history, rather than a fragmentary memory. Elena saw the rise of Lyra's civilization, a species that evolved in a crystalline environment saturated with radiation. Their direct mental communication had developed as an adaptation to this environment, allowing them to share knowledge and experiences across generations with perfect fidelity. They had been peaceful explorers, making contact with other species through the galaxy, but their ability to share thoughts directly had made many uncomfortable. When they discovered that their unique biology could heal certain neural conditions in other species, they had offered this gift freely, only to find themselves hunted for it, as various powers sought to control and weaponize their abilities. The colony where Elena had found Lyra had been one of the last refuges of her people, hidden at the border between galactic territories in the hope that obscurity would provide safety. That hope had been shattered when the colony was caught in the crossfire of a border dispute. Lyra was not just a child. She was the last hope of her species, carrying within her genetic structure the collective memory and knowledge of her entire civilization. When the vision faded, Elena found tears streaming down her face. I understand now, she whispered, and I promise you, Lyra, I won't let them use you as a weapon or a laboratory specimen. The harmonic resonance from Lyra's filaments took on a new pattern, one that somehow conveyed both ancient wisdom and childlike trust. Elena knew that the battle for Lyra's freedom and safety was just beginning. When they reached Outpost 47, the Alliance containment team would use every scientific and legal argument to take custody of the child. They would cite security protocols, research potential, even the greater good of the Alliance. But Elena had made her decision. Whatever the cost to her career or even her freedom, she would protect this child, this last survivor of a remarkable species that had chosen healing over violence, even as they were hunted to extinction. As the shuttle continued its journey through hyperspace, Elena began making plans. She would need allies, resources, and a way to escape the containment team if necessary. It would mean becoming a fugitive from the organization she had served faithfully for 15 years. Looking at Lyra, whose eyes were now closed in peaceful sleep, Elena found that the choice was easier than she had expected. Some principles transcended loyalty to institutions, even ones as powerful as the Galactic Alliance. Rest now, she whispered to the sleeping child. We have a long journey ahead of us. The isolation room had become a prison. 3 days had passed since their arrival at Outpost 47, and Elena had been relegated to observer status as Alliance scientists conducted increasingly invasive tests on Lyra. Dr. Mori had been reassigned to the research team, his initial ethical concerns apparently overwhelmed by the scientific opportunity before him. Elena watched through the observation window as Lyra endured another neural scan. her filaments vibrating with a frequency that Elena had come to recognize as pain. The child never cried out. Her species had no vocal cords, but the discordant harmonics she produced cut through Elena more painfully than any scream. "The subject's neural pathways are reorganizing again," Dr. Mori reported, his voice carrying through the monitoring system. "It's as if the brain is evolving in response to our scanning methods." "Increase the resolution," ordered Dr. Lindholm, the head of the containment team. "We need to map the entire neural structure before the adaptation completes." Elena clenched her fists, forcing herself to remain silent. Any protest would only result in her removal from the observation area, and she needed to stay close to Lyra if her plan had any chance of success. The plan itself was desperate and fraught with risk. Elena had spent her limited free time gathering supplies and information, using her medical clearance to access restricted areas of the outpost. She had identified potential escape routes, security protocols, and, most crucially, the location of a small research vessel that could be commandeered in an emergency. What she lacked was allies. Lieutenant Vale had been reassigned immediately upon their arrival. His unusual defense of Lyra, noted in Commander Voss's report. Dr. Mori had been quickly seduced by the scientific significance of the discovery, his earlier ethical concerns buried beneath professional ambition. Elena was alone, except for Lyra herself. Through their brief mental connections, Elena had learned that Lyra's abilities were growing stronger as her body recovered. The child could now influence simple electronic systems and create minor illusions in the minds of those around her. But these abilities were limited and exhausting to use, and the containment team's neural suppressors kept Lyra's powers mostly in check. As the latest scanning session ended, Elena watched the research team exit the isolation room, leaving Lyra alone on the examination table. The child's glow had dimmed with exhaustion, her filaments drooping lifelessly against her translucent skin. Elena waited until the research team had disappeared down the corridor before entering the isolation room. Officially, she was still Lyra's attending physician, responsible for monitoring her physical welfare between research sessions. "Hey," she said softly, approaching the table. "I brought you something." Lyra's eyes opened slowly, the swirling patterns within them moving sluggishly. Her filaments vibrated weakly in recognition. Elena pulled a small device from her pocket and placed it beneath the examination table, out of sight of the security cameras. "This will create a 5-minute loop in the surveillance system tonight at 0200 hours. When the lights dim, I'll come for you." Lyra's filaments vibrated in a pattern that Elena had come to recognize as a question. "Yes, we're leaving," Elena confirmed, pretending to check Lyra's vital signs for the benefit of anyone monitoring. "I've found a way off this station. It won't be easy, and we'll be fugitives. But it's better than what they have planned for you." She had seen the classified reports, accessed through Dr. Mori's carelessly stored datapad. The Alliance's military division had already begun developing protocols for harvesting Lyra's genetic material and neural tissue for study. The word survival had been conspicuously absent from these reports. Lyra reached out, her slender fingers touching Elena's wrist. The now familiar sensation of mental connection bloomed in Elena's mind. But instead of memories or visions, she received something else, a set of complex instructions, like a blueprint being downloaded directly into her consciousness. When the connection broke, Elena staggered slightly, overwhelmed by the information. "What was that?" she whispered. Lyra's filaments vibrated in a pattern that somehow conveyed both urgency and hope. Elena nodded slowly, as understanding dawned. "The ship's navigation system. You showed me how to program it to find others? There are more of your people?" The harmonic resonance from Lyra's filaments shifted to a higher, more melodic frequency. Affirmation. "But the report said your colony was the last," Elena whispered, hope and confusion warring within her. Lyra's response was another gentle touch, another brief connection. This time, Elena saw scattered points of light across a star map, hidden refuges, carefully concealed from galactic detection systems. Not many. Perhaps only a few hundred survivors in total, but enough to ensure the species' survival if they could be reunited. "I understand," Elena said, her resolve strengthening. "Tonight, then, be ready." As she turned to leave, the door to the isolation room slid open, revealing Commander Voss and Dr. Lindholm. Their expressions told Elena immediately that something had gone wrong. "Captain Reyes," Commander Voss said, his voice cold with formality. "You are relieved of all duties related to the alien specimen, effective immediately." Elena forced her expression to remain neutral. "May I ask why, Commander?" Dr. Lindholm stepped forward, holding a datapad. "Our analysis has revealed concerning patterns in the subject's neural activity when you are present. It appears to be attempting to establish some form of deeper connection with you, possibly as a means of manipulation." "That's absurd," Elena protested, though she knew it was partially true. "I'm simply monitoring the patient's medical condition, as is my duty." "Your duty ended when we arrived at this outpost, Captain," Commander Voss said sharply. "The containment team has full jurisdiction now. You will return to your quarters and prepare for reassignment. A transport will take you to Central Command tomorrow at 800 hours. Elena felt a cold dread settling in her stomach. Tomorrow morning. Her plan had been discovered, or at least suspected. The timeline had just collapsed from hours to minutes. She glanced at Lyra, whose filaments had gone completely still, a sign of intense concentration or stress. The child's eyes were fixed on Commander Voss with an unnerving intensity. "I understand, Commander," Elena said, playing for time. "I'll gather my research notes and transfer them to Dr. Lindholm's team before I depart." "That won't be necessary," Dr. Lindholm interjected. "All your notes have already been incorporated into our database." Of course they had. Elena should have expected nothing less from the containment team. As she moved toward the door, the lights in the isolation room suddenly flickered. For a brief moment, the power seemed to fail completely, plunging the room into darkness except for the ethereal glow emanating from Lyra's translucent skin. When the emergency lights activated a second later, Elena acted on pure instinct. She lunged toward the examination table, scooping Lyra into her arms, and sprinted for the door before Commander Voss or Dr. Lindholm could react. "Security breach in Isolation Room 7, Commander Voss shouted into his communicator as Elena pushed past him. "Captain Reyes is attempting to remove the alien specimen." Elena ran down the corridor, holding Lyra close against her chest. The child's filaments were vibrating rapidly, creating a harmonic resonance that seemed to interfere with the outpost systems. Doors opened before Elena reached them, and security cameras swiveled away as she passed. Lyra was helping, using whatever abilities she possessed to aid their escape. Alarm klaxons began blaring throughout the outpost, and Elena could hear security teams mobilizing. Her original escape plan was now useless. The careful timing, the security loop, the covered route to the docking bay, all worthless in the face of an active pursuit. She needed a new plan, and quickly. "Lyra," she gasped as she ran. "Can you show me another way out? A maintenance shaft, an emergency exit, anything." The child's response was immediate. Another rapid download of information directly into Elena's mind. A maintenance tunnel, rarely used, that connected the research wing to the auxiliary docking bay, where supply ships delivered provisions to the outpost. Elena changed direction, diving through a narrow doorway just as a security team rounded the corner behind them. The maintenance tunnel was cramped and dimly lit, designed for service droids rather than humans. "Hold tight," Elena whispered to Lyra as she crawled through the tight space. "We're going to make it." The tunnel seemed endless, twisting through the infrastructure of the outpost. Elena could hear the security alert continuing above them, the sounds muffled by layers of metal and insulation. Her muscles burned with exertion, and sweat stung her eyes. But she pushed forward relentlessly. Finally, the tunnel widened into a junction chamber. Elena paused to catch her breath and check on Lyra. The child's glow had dimmed significantly, her filaments drooping with exhaustion. "You've used too much energy helping us escape," Elena realized, concern overriding her urgency. "Rest now. I'll get us the rest of the way." Lyra's filaments vibrated weakly in protest, but her eyes were already closing as her body entered what Elena recognized as a conservation state, similar to hibernation, but designed for rapid recovery. With renewed determination, Elena continued through the maintenance system, following the mental map Lyra had provided. Eventually, she reached a service hatch that, according to Lyra's information, should open into the auxiliary docking bay. Elena pressed her ear against the hatch, listening for any sign of security forces on the other side. Hearing nothing, she carefully pushed it open and peered out. The auxiliary docking bay was smaller than the main bay, designed for automated supply deliveries rather than passenger vessels. Currently, it held only a single ship, a small, sleek research vessel with the Alliance Scientific Division's emblem on its hull. Perfect. Scientific vessels had extended range and advanced navigation systems, exactly what they would need to reach the hidden refuges Lyra had shown her. Elena slipped out of the hatch and darted across the bay, keeping to the shadows. The security alert was still blaring, but this section of the outpost seemed to have been overlooked in the initial sweep. Or perhaps Lyra's interference with the station's systems had directed the search elsewhere. The research vessel's entry ramp was locked, but Elena's medical override code, meant for emergency evacuations, worked on the first try. The ramp descended silently, and Elena hurried aboard with Lyra cradled in her arms. The ship's interior was compact, but well-equipped. Elena carefully placed Lyra on a padded bench in the main cabin before rushing to the cockpit. The controls were familiar enough. She had piloted similar vessels during research expeditions. As she began the startup sequence, Elena heard heavy footsteps on the docking bay floor. Looking through the viewport, she saw Lieutenant Vale leading a security team into the bay, weapons drawn. "Captain Reyes!" His voice boomed through the ship's external communication system. "Power down the vessel and surrender the alien immediately. This is your final warning." Elena's hands hovered over the controls. She had come this far, risked everything, her career, her freedom, possibly even her life. But facing armed Alliance security forces was a line she had never imagined crossing. A soft, harmonic resonance drew her attention. Lyra had awakened and moved to the cockpit entrance, her filaments vibrating with renewed energy. The child reached out a hand toward Elena. In that moment of connection, Elena saw not just the star map of hidden refuges, but something more, a vision of what could be Lyra's people, with their remarkable abilities, working together with humans and other species to heal rather than harm. A future where direct understanding replaced fear and suspicion. It was worth fighting for. Elena completed the startup sequence and engaged the engines. The research vessel hummed to life, lifting off from the docking bay floor as Lieutenant Vale and his team scrambled for cover. "This is Alliance Outpost 47 to research vessel SC-219. Commander Voss's voice crackled through the communication system. "Captain Reyes, you are committing an act of treason against the Galactic Alliance. Power down immediately, or we will be forced to take lethal action." Elena opened a channel to respond. "This is Captain Elena Reyes. I am invoking Alliance Charter Article 23, the protection of sentient rights. The being you call the specimen is a child and the survivor of a genocide. I am transporting her to safety, as is my duty under interstellar law. That child is a bioengineered weapon." "Captain," Commander Voss replied, his voice hard. You've been manipulated by its neural abilities. Return to the outpost for a medical evaluation." "She showed me the truth, Commander," Elena said firmly. "Her people were peaceful healers who were hunted because others feared what they didn't understand. I won't let that happen again." As she spoke, Elena guided the ship toward the docking bay's atmospheric shield. Beyond it lay open space and freedom. "Security teams, target the research vessel's engines," Commander Voss ordered. "Disable only. We need the specimen intact." Elena saw the security teams positioning themselves, weapons aimed at the ship's lower hull, where the propulsion systems were located. She had seconds, at most, before they opened fire. Lyra moved to stand beside her, placing a small hand on the ship's control panel. The harmonic resonance from her filaments intensified, resonating with the ship's systems in a way Elena couldn't understand, but could definitely perceive. The research vessel surged forward with unexpected speed, passing through the atmospheric shield before the security teams could fire. The sudden acceleration threw Elena back against her seat, but Lyra remained standing, her translucent body glowing with renewed energy. "What did you do?" Elena asked in amazement as the outpost rapidly receded behind them. Lyra's filaments vibrated in a pattern that somehow conveyed both pride and mischief. "You can interface with the ship's systems directly," Elena realized. "That's incredible." The momentary triumph was cut short as the ship's sensors detected 2 Alliance patrol vessels launching from the outpost's main docking bay. "They're coming after us," Elena muttered, studying the tactical display. The patrol vessels were faster and better armed than the research ship. In open space, they would be caught within minutes. Lyra's filaments vibrated rapidly, and the navigation console lit up with a complex set of coordinates, one of the hidden refugees from the star map. "Too far," Elena said, shaking her head. "We'd need to reach hyperspace, and they'll catch us before we can make the jump." Lyra's response was to place both hands on the control panel. The harmonic resonance from her filaments shifted to a deeper, more resonant frequency, and Elena felt the ship's engines responding in ways that defied the specifications she knew. The research vessel accelerated again, pushing Elena back into her seat with crushing force. The patrol vessels fell behind, unable to match their suddenly impossible speed. "How are you doing this?" Elena gasped, watching the distance between them and their pursuers widen on the tactical display. Lyra didn't respond, her entire focus on the ship's systems. Her translucent skin had taken on a brighter glow, pulsing in rhythm with the ship's engines. Within minutes, they had reached the minimum safe distance for a hyperspace jump. Elena's hands flew over the navigation controls, inputting the coordinates Lyra had provided. "Hyperspace jump in 3, 2, 1. The stars stretched into lines, and the research vessel lunged forward into the swirling tunnel of hyperspace. They had escaped, for now. As the immediate danger passed, Elena turned to check on Lyra. The child had collapsed to the floor, her glow dimmed to an alarming level. "Lyra!" Elena knelt beside her, medical training taking over. The child's life signs were weak, her filaments completely still. "You pushed yourself too hard. Why did you do that?" Lyra's eyes opened slowly, the swirling patterns within them moving sluggishly. With obvious effort, she reached up to touch Elena's face. The mental connection was faint but clear. Gratitude, trust, and something deeper. A bond that transcended species. Lyra had risked her life, not just for her own freedom, but for Elena's as well. They were in this together now, fugitives from the Alliance, seekers of a hidden sanctuary. "Rest now," Elena whispered, carefully lifting the child and carrying her to the ship's small medical bay. "I'll watch over you." As she connected Lyra to the medical monitors, Elena realized the enormity of what they had done and what lay ahead. They would be hunted across the galaxy, branded as traitors and thieves. The Alliance would never stop searching for them, never stop trying to reclaim the specimen they considered so valuable. But looking at Lyra, now sleeping peacefully as her body slowly recovered, Elena knew she had made the right choice. Some principles were worth any price. "You're safe now," she whispered, echoing the words she had spoken when she first found Lyra in the ruins of the colony. "And I promise, you'll stay that way." The hidden refuge was not what Elena had expected. After 2 weeks of careful navigation through uncharted regions of space, following the coordinates Lyra had provided, they had arrived at what appeared to be an uninhabited asteroid field, orbiting a dying star. "Are you sure this is the right place?" Elena asked, studying the sensor readings with growing concern. Their supplies were running low, and the research vessel's power cells were nearly depleted after the strain Lyra had put on them during their escape. Lyra, now fully recovered from her exertions, stood beside Elena in the cockpit. Her filaments vibrated in a pattern of absolute certainty as she guided Elena's hands on the controls, directing the ship toward a particularly large asteroid. As they approached, the sensors suddenly flickered, showing contradictory readings. According to one scan, the asteroid was solid rock with traces of common minerals. According to another, conducted on a different frequency, the asteroid contained vast hollow spaces and energy signatures consistent with artificial structures. "A sensor cloak," Elena realized. "Brilliant." Following Lyra's guidance, she piloted the ship toward what appeared to be a solid rock face. Trust warred with instinct as the asteroid loomed larger in the viewport, seemingly moments away from a catastrophic collision. Just when impact seemed inevitable, a section of the asteroid's surface shimmered and vanished, revealing a docking bay carved into the rock. Elena guided the ship inside, and the illusory rock face reappeared behind them, sealing them within the asteroid. The docking bay was small, but well maintained, with a half-dozen ships of unfamiliar design already docked. As their vessel settled onto the landing pad, Elena saw figures emerging from a doorway at the far end of the bay. They were Lyra's people, adults of the same species, their translucent bodies glowing with an inner light, more vibrant than Lyra's, their crystalline filaments longer and more numerous. They moved with a graceful fluidity that made them seem almost ethereal. "They're beautiful," Elena whispered. Lyra's filaments vibrated with excitement, creating a complex harmonic pattern that resonated throughout the ship. The approaching figures paused, their own filaments responding in kind, creating a symphony of harmonics that Elena could feel in her bones. "They're communicating with you," she realized. "Telling them who we are, what happened." Lyra nodded, her large eyes fixed on her people with longing and joy. Elena felt a sudden pang of loss. She had known this moment would come, the moment when Lyra would be reunited with her own kind, when the desperate bond between them would no longer be necessary for survival. Yet the prospect of losing the connection they had formed left an unexpected hollow in her chest. "You should go to them," she said softly. "They've been waiting for you." Lyra turned to look at Elena, her filaments vibrating in a pattern of confusion and concern. She reached out to touch Elena's face, initiating a mental connection that had become familiar over their weeks together. The message was clear and firm. "You are coming too. You are part of this now." Tears stung Elena's eyes. "They might not want a human among them, Lyra. Not after what my people tried to do to you." Lyra's response was to take Elena's hand and lead her toward the ship's airlock. The gesture needed no translation. Together, they descended the ramp into the docking bay. The air was warmer than standard Alliance environments, with a slight crystalline quality that made Elena's skin tingle. The gravity was lighter, giving each step a floating sensation. The group of Lyra's people waited at a respectful distance, their filaments creating a continuous, gentle harmony that somehow conveyed both welcome and caution. One figure stepped forward, taller than the others, with filaments that shimmered with iridescent colors. Lyra released Elena's hand and moved toward this figure. When they met, their filaments intertwined in what Elena recognized as a gesture of profound connection. The harmonic resonance intensified, filling the docking bay with sound that was almost visible, like ripples in the air. Elena stood awkwardly, feeling like an intruder in this reunion. She was acutely aware of her alienness in this environment, her solid, opaque body, her inability to participate in the harmonic communication, her connection to the very organization that had sought to exploit these people. After what seemed an eternity, Lyra and the tall figure separated. Lyra turned back to Elena, gesturing for her to approach. With hesitant steps, Elena moved forward. The tall figure regarded her with those large, swirling eyes that seemed to see far more than physical appearance. "Welcome, Elena Reyes of Earth." The words formed in Elena's mind without passing through her ears, a direct communication that felt both intimate and strange. "I am Sauron, Elder of the Luminari. What remains of us? Our child has shown us what you risked to protect her." "You speak directly to my mind," Elena said in wonder. "It is how we communicate with those who cannot hear the harmonics," Sauron replied, his filaments creating a pattern that somehow conveyed both amusement and respect. "Lyra has told us everything. Your courage, your sacrifice, your compassion. Few in this galaxy would risk so much for a child not of their own kind." Elena felt a warmth spread through her at the unexpected acceptance. "I only did what anyone would do." "No," Sauron corrected gently. "You did what few would do, and for that, you have our eternal gratitude and our protection, for you are now hunted as we are hunted." The reality of her situation came crashing back. Elena was a fugitive from the Alliance, guilty of theft, insubordination, and what would likely be classified as treason. She could never return to her former life. "I didn't think that far ahead," she admitted. "I just knew I couldn't let them hurt Lyra." Sauron's filaments vibrated in a pattern that resonated with understanding. Such is the nature of true courage, acting because it is right, not because it is safe or planned. He gestured toward the doorway from which they had emerged. "Come. There is much to discuss, and you have questions that need answers." As they walked through corridors carved from the asteroid's rock and lined with crystalline structures that glowed with inner light, Elena felt Lyra's small hand slip into hers again. The child's filaments brushed against her arm, creating a gentle harmony that somehow conveyed reassurance and pride. "You said I'm under your protection," Elena said to Sauron as they walked. "But I've brought danger to your refuge. The Alliance won't stop looking for us, for Lyra." "We have survived in secrecy for generations," Sauron replied, his mental voice calm and confident. "This refuge is one of several, each hidden in ways your Alliance cannot easily detect. We have developed technologies and abilities specifically designed to evade those who would hunt us." They entered a large chamber where dozens of luminari moved about in what appeared to be a combination of living space and research facility. Crystalline structures grew from the walls and ceiling, pulsing with light and rhythm with the harmonic resonance created by the inhabitants. "Our numbers are few," Sauron continued, "but we are not without resources or allies. There are others in the galaxy who recognize the value of diversity and healing over conformity and weaponization." Elena noticed something unusual about many of the luminari in the chamber. They were accompanied by beings of other species, humans, humanoids, and even some life forms Elena didn't recognize, all moving comfortably among the luminari as if they belonged. "You have other guests?" she asked, struggling to find the right word. "Not guests," Sauron corrected. "Family, partners. Those who, like you, chose to stand with us rather than against us. Some came seeking healing for conditions their own medicine could not treat. Others came seeking knowledge or refuge. All found a home. The concept was both alien and deeply familiar to Elena. A community built not on shared biology, but on shared values: healing, protection, growth. "And now you must decide," Sauron said, turning to face her directly. "Having brought Lyra to safety, you could take your ship and seek your own path. There are places in the galaxy where the Alliance's reach is limited. With the right resources, you could build a new life for yourself." Elena felt Lyra's hand tighten around hers, the child's filaments vibrating with a pattern of distress. "Or," Sauron continued, "you could stay with us, learn our ways, help us in our work. It would not be the life you planned, but it might be a life of purpose." The choice seemed both monumental and, somehow, already made. Elena looked at Lyra, whose large eyes gazed up at her with trust and hope. "What work do you do here?" she asked Sauron, though she already suspected the answer. "We heal," he replied simply. "We preserve knowledge, and we search for a way to eventually emerge from hiding without being destroyed by fear." His filaments created a pattern that somehow conveyed both ancient sadness and unconquerable hope. "Your scientific knowledge could be valuable in that effort. Your understanding of Alliance thinking even more so." Elena thought of the life she had left behind, the career built on exploration and discovery, the colleagues who had become friends, the structure and purpose provided by the Alliance. It had been a good life, in many ways. But looking at Lyra, remembering the containment room and the tests, and the clinical discussions of harvesting genetic material, she knew she could never return to that life with a clear conscience. "I'll stay," she said finally. "At least until I'm sure Lyra is settled and safe." Sauron's filaments vibrated in a pattern that resonated with approval and something like knowing amusement. "Then, welcome to your new home, Elena Reyes. The path ahead will not be easy, but few worthy paths are." As the days turned into weeks, and then months, Elena found herself adapting to life among the Luminari with surprising ease. The asteroid refuge was larger than it had first appeared, with multiple levels carved into the rock and a complex ecosystem maintained through a combination of advanced technology and the Luminaries' natural abilities. Her medical and scientific knowledge proved valuable, as Sauron had predicted. Working with the Luminary healers, Elena helped develop new treatments for a variety of conditions affecting species throughout the galaxy. Patients came to the refuge through a network of trusted allies. Their identities and the location of the asteroid kept secret through elaborate security protocols. Lyra became her constant companion and, increasingly, her teacher. The child's abilities continued to develop at an astonishing rate, and she took particular delight in helping Elena learn the basics of harmonic communication. While Elena would never be able to produce the resonant frequencies naturally, she learned to recognize patterns and even to use simple devices that could generate harmonics for basic communication. One evening, as they sat together in the small chamber that had become Elena's home, Lyra shared another memory. Not of the past this time, but of the future she imagined. A galaxy where her people could emerge from hiding, where their abilities could be used openly to heal, rather than being exploited as weapons or tools. "It's a beautiful vision," Elena said when the connection ended. "But the Alliance isn't ready for it. The fear runs too deep." Lyra's filaments vibrated in a pattern that Elena had come to recognize as gentle disagreement. The child placed a hand on Elena's heart, then on her own, creating a brief mental connection that conveyed a simple but powerful message. Change begins with individuals, not institutions. "You think I can help change the Alliance from the inside," Elena realized. "That's why you wanted me to stay, not just for your protection, but because someday I might be able to help build a bridge between our peoples." Lyra's filaments vibrated in affirmation, her large eyes filled with the wisdom that sometimes made Elena forget she was communicating with a child. "That's a long-term plan," Elena said with a small smile. "The Alliance has branded me a traitor. It could be decades before anyone would listen to what I have to say." Lyra's response was a harmonic pattern that somehow conveyed both patience and certainty. Her people measured time in generations, not years. They could wait. And in the meantime, they would heal. They would learn. They would grow. One patient, one ally, one connection at a time. As Elena drifted off to sleep that night, she found herself thinking of that moment in the ruins of the colony, when she had first held Lyra in her arms and whispered, "You're safe now." She had meant it as a simple comfort to a dying child, never imagining that the moment would change the course of both their lives. She couldn't know then that Lyra would remember those words forever, that they would become the foundation of a bond that transcended species and circumstance. A bond that might, someday, help heal the divisions in a fractured galaxy. For now, it was enough that they had found sanctuary, purpose, and connection. The future would unfold in its own time, shaped by choices made with courage and compassion rather than fear. And whatever came next, they would face it together. 50 years passed like the blink of an eye and the span of eternity. The sanctuary asteroid had long since been abandoned, the Luminary and their allies relocating multiple times as the Galactic Alliance's search patterns evolved. Yet, through it all, they had not only survived, but thrived, their network growing with each passing year. Elena Reyes, once a captain in the Alliance's medical corps, now bore the title of Elder among the Luminari, an honor rarely bestowed on non-native members of their community. Her hair had turned silver, her face lined with the passage of time, but her eyes remained sharp and determined as ever. And Lyra, the dying child Elena had rescued from the ruins of a colony half a century ago, had grown into a leader of her people. Her translucent body glowed with a light that outshone all others, her crystalline filaments creating harmonics of remarkable complexity and beauty. She had become known among the various species of their hidden community as the Bridge, one who could connect minds and hearts across the divisions of biology and culture. They stood together now on the observation deck of a diplomatic vessel, watching as the gleaming spires of the Galactic Alliance's Central Command came into view against the backdrop of a blue-green planet. "Are you nervous?" Elena asked, though she already knew the answer. After decades of sharing thoughts and memories, they could read each other with or without the harmonic connection. "Cautiously optimistic," Lyra replied, her mental voice carrying the musical quality that all luminary communications held. "The Alliance has changed in 50 years. New leadership, new priorities, and new problems they can't solve alone," Elena added. The devastating neural plague that had swept through Central Alliance territories had proven resistant to all conventional treatments. Only when underground reports of miraculous healings by the Luminari had reached the highest levels of command had the unthinkable happened, an official request for contact and assistance. "They still don't know it's you," Lyra noted, her filaments vibrating with a pattern that conveyed both amusement and concern. "The famous traitor, returning as a diplomatic envoy." Elena smiled. "Let's hope the statute of limitations has expired on stealing a research vessel." Her attempt at humor masked a very real apprehension. Despite the official amnesty granted to the Luminary delegation, she knew there would be those in the Alliance who remembered her defection and would demand accountability. Their ship docked at the diplomatic bay, where an honor guard awaited, a sign of the desperation that had driven the Alliance to seek help from a species they had once classified as a biological threat. As the airlock opened, Elena felt Lyra's hand slip into hers, just as it had countless times over the decades. The gesture had become a ritual between them, a reminder of that first connection in the ruins, of the trust that had grown between them, of the future they had worked toward together. "Ready?" Elena asked. Lyra's filaments vibrated in a harmonic pattern that needed no translation. "Always, when we are together." They stepped forward, into the light of a new day and the possibility of a healed galaxy. The former fugitive and the child who had remembered, forever, the moment when compassion had transcended fear. The end and the beginning.